Welcome back to Two Homers and a Realist. This is the postgame pod for the West Virginia debacle. West Virginia prevails 23-20 in what was just a pathetic showing for OU. And I'll put it, my summary is this team is broken. This team is just absolutely broken from top to bottom, inside and out.
Is it fixable?
It's not fixable this year.
This is not fixable at this point.
All right.
Not fixable. But we're close to it being the
really bad. We're close to it being really, really
worst
bad.
thing you can imagine in your worst nightmares coming into this from where you might have been a year ago. Like, who would have just imagined a year ago at this time when we're about to go play? We lose our last two, Baylor and then Oklahoma State, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Or-
No,
no,
2 of the last 3.
That's right. So this would have been after the Baylor game last year.
Yep.
Yep. And
Our
then,
first loss.
And then we go
We
and
beat Iowa
and
State.
beat Iowa
Then we
State.
lost to
And
them, yep.
so who would have imagined that from that Baylor game, this would be where we sit today?
Who are you?
I'm Steve.
I'm Lucas.
I'm Connor.
And I think, you know,
No, I'm sorry.
that's
I'm
about as
depressed.
fitting as
I'm depressed today.
as anything. Yeah. I think as lost as the team is, I don't know who anybody is at this point. I look at the guys in those weird uniforms today that lost that game, and I don't.
9-1 now.
They don't look like the
upsetting.
Sooners. Well, let's talk about the game. Let's try to break down a little bit of what we saw and what we think going forward, and just kind of, if nothing else, let's be cathartic and vent and talk about the stuff that is so frustrating about all of this.
Coaching decisions.
Who wants to start us off? Let me start us off with a couple of questions that'll lead, I think, into everything that we want to talk about for the most part in breaking down this game. They're very related. The first is, how much responsibility for today is it on coaches versus players? And then in a similar sense, how much is the responsibility of the loss on the offense versus the defense? I've got my perspective. What is your perspective, though, guys?
If I had to put numbers to it, I would say 30% coaching, 70% players, holistically. And then from a both sides of the ball perspective, I would say this is 75% the offense's fault of not winning and 25% the defense, if I had to just assign numbers to all of it. So,
What do you say, Lucas?
I'd say probably the same 70-30 players to coaches, and I would say 60-40 offense to defense. The defense, we gave up 23 points, which isn't enough that you should be losing to West Virginia, because we've run up 50 and 60 on them lots of times over the last decade. And they're not any better on defense this year than they have been in the past.
No.
We made them look like they were, but they're not. And so the defensive bad parts were the fourth downs, not getting off the field on 3rd and long.
which was really just prevalent in the second half.
Couple
right?
bad penalties. And the offense, the first half it's 10-0, or was it 10-0? No.
10-0 about to
No,
go
it was
into half.
12-6 at half. Yeah, it was 10-0 with, a minute and a half left and we let them go right down the field and score a touchdown.
in 3 plays.
Yeah, that one's on the defense. We should have gone in 10-0 at half. But actually, it should have been 17-0. Marvin Mims drops a wide open touchdown to start, early in the first quarter. And it's literally, we've talked about it all year in the close games. We weren't going to beat Texas. We weren't going to beat TCU after Gabriel got knocked out. But the Baylor game come down to literally 1 or 2 plays. The K-State game is 1 or 2 plays. In this game, there's probably 8 different plays.
At least.
If 1 or
At
2 of
least.
those 8 go the right way, then we sneak out of here with a 3 to 7 point victory.
Yeah,
Yep.
0-3 in one possession football games this year.
Yep. I'm very similar to you guys. I was going to say basically that I think it's 30-70 coaches versus players and 70-30 offense versus defense. As frustrated as you can get with the defense and giving up critical 3rd downs, critical 4th downs, bust at different times, they did enough to win the football game today, where the offense really didn't and let them down, especially taking so long to score, getting stalled out early in the first quarter. That was very frustrating. The struggles there, you mentioned one drop ball. There were multiple drop balls. Mims dropped several balls. Then he gets overthrown on a ball that's a touchdown. There's probably 3 scores that you can look at that were 2 of them touchdown passes, one dropped by him and one overthrown when he's wide open.
On 2 separate drives.
On
So-
2
so
completely
those are-
separate
that's
drives
14
where we did
points.
not score.
And
then
then
you
the
got the-
Willis
then you
got the Willis touchdown.
And the
Yeah,
Willis
called
touchdown,
back.
which is a bad call.
People are blaming Willis for like the play supposedly was set up for Willis to catch the ball behind the line of scrimmage, so the Weiss block was legal. I still think he caught it on the 5-yard line, which was the line of scrimmage, even though his body was past it, where he actually contacted the ball with his hands was the 5-yard line. So I think that was legal.
It looked legal to me, or at least it didn't look like it was enough to overturn it. That surprised me.
Especially from the camera angles that they had.
Right. And just to kind of put icing on the cake here, I would like to really commend the Big 12 Conference and talk about their officiating and the Big 12 officials for their voluntary efforts. As volunteers, I think they do good because there's no way they get paid for that shit, right?
I wouldn't call them volunteers. I call them mountaineers in this game.
Yeah, well, they're awful, and they yet again proved themselves to be awful in a number of ways, some of them small. As we were watching the game, Lucas was really good at pointing out how many bad spots there were, where we would seemingly get the ball spotted a good yard behind where it was clear that we went down.
And it was always the referee on the top of the screen. We would run.
That was our sideline, right?
We would have an 8-yard gain,
Just
and
surprising.
then he's marking it 7 yards. And
Yeah.
it happened. It wasn't just a homerish view of it. It was literally, I was pointing it out multiple times over and over throughout the game, and then even a couple of West
pretty
Virginia
clear.
that they were giving an extra yard to.
Yeah.
That
Sloppy
wasn't-
spots
yeah.
that were one-sided bias by the same ref every time. And it frustrates me that we don't get a little bit more of a vocal challenge from the coaching staff on that, although that's a tough thing to perceive probably, and they're trying to get the next play in, especially as that we run so much hurry up. But one more thing to point out about the officiating that is frustrating, and this one is the most egregious, the no call, picking up the flag after you've called a bad hit on the interception in the end zone when, who was the player
we were
caught the ball?
offsides.
So we're offsides. It's a
free
potential
play.
free play,
Right.
but he throws it up for grabs.
I believe it was Colden who caught it.
And Colden
He
catches the
intercepts
ball,
it, then kneels in the corner
is
of the end
going to
zone.
kneel in the end zone, which I guess it's clear on the replay that he actually touches the ground.
Yeah.
I don't think it matters
No.
because he's giving himself up when he goes to take a knee.
Yeah.
In the action of that, you can't fake it taking a knee anymore.
And he gets a
And he
shoulder
gets
to the helmet.
blown up with definitely a hit to the head,
Probably a targeting.
probably a targeting, if not a late hit, unsportsmanlike conduct, and they call it on the field and then discuss it and pull the flag.
Yeah.
That just doesn't make any sense to me at all. And I would have liked to have seen, although I didn't get a chance to see them not doing it, I would have liked to see Venables blow up enough at that point that at least we're seeing it because he's calling the official over to have him explain it to him what's going on and yelling at him in the name of player safety and justice and everything else. It was just pathetic. And it was a big swing in the game, a really critical time in the third quarter.
Yeah, that was 3rd and 11.
when
The 5-yard penalty would have made it 3rd and 6, but then the 15-yard penalty would have backed them up. So it would have made it 3rd and 21.
right.
And who knows, we may not even stop them on that with our luck. But more than likely we stop them and they kick a field goal, but instead they score a touchdown.
Yeah. So
Was that not a 4th down play?
No.
That was 3rd down.
Third
Third
down?
Yeah, I think it was 3rd and 11 if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Well, regardless. Just one
Well,
of those things, too. We just couldn't get off the
it's-
field in the second half.
It was just an extremely frustrating thing to see transpire that seemed exceptionally dangerous and pretty obvious. And to see them pull the flag, just I don't understand it. It
The
doesn't make
announcer
sense to
said
me.
that was a penalty. I don't know if they went to Mike Pereira or not on that.
I didn't see that either.
But I still don't understand them reviewing. They picked up the flag on the Willis touchdown. They picked it up, and then before we could kick the extra point, they went to review to see if it should have been a penalty.
Yeah, I'm
Uh-huh.
interested to know that there's
I don't know the
apparently
inner
so
workings of
many
that.
different nuances to the reasoning refs can go to the booth, because at this point it seems like when they pick that flag up and go review it, it looks like anything can go to the booth,
right.
and then
And
all
then-
it takes is a discussion to pick up
Yeah.
the flag in the back of the end zone where we get hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just asinine across the board, and it's been
really
such
pathetic.
a roller coaster ride of just head scratching moments that, like you said, Lucas, there were 8 to 10 plays in that entire game where if we end up on the other side of it, we probably win.
It's
So-
very frustrating when you're a team that is so bad, like we are. You're very sensitive to anything, and this is something in a way that we're extremely sensitive to, that when it's not going in your favor and it's biased to one side, and even if it's, I say biased, I do think there's a bias there, but even if it's unintentional, even if it's just the luck of the draw, you're being harmed by it in a way that a good team isn't going to be sensitive to it. But we unfortunately need every break we can get, and we definitely don't need every break going against us. Or
We
most
can't
every
be
break.
we can't be biased to the point that we've been complaining as much as what we have this season, game in and game out, about the
Right.
officiating. If there wasn't something that we're seeing, like
And it's a spillover from last year as well.
So-
we talked about on last season, at the very beginning of the Tulane post game, we talked about how it was, or maybe it was the midweek after that. We talked about what our expectations were with the announcement of going to the SEC, how the referees would affect our games based on that. And even though we started 9-0, we had plenty of instances during that season that we complained, and then especially at the OSU, at the final play of the OSU game, that
Yep.
was a huge pass interference.
Yeah.
That
Among other bad
wasn't-
calls throughout that
was an
game.
obvious non-call, and then it's just
Obvious,
literally
the non-call was a bad call.
Yeah, obviously. And then going into this season, it just seems like one after another, game by game, you can point. And we're not just talking miscellaneous holding calls, even though there's been tons of our defensive line rushing and getting held. Those are objective, to the referees, and
Right.
but it's literally stuff that's completely subjective that they're not getting right.
Yeah, that are critical and in big ways. No, and I'm not going to give them the grace of saying that it's just how bad they are at their job. And I don't think they're very good at their job. We see a lot of games that OU's not involved in where we see bad calls. We see games that OU is involved in where it's a bad call that goes in OU's favor. So they're not good at their job. They're not perfect, but they're far from perfect. In fact, they're way below what I think the standard should be. This is beyond all of that. This is really true accusations of bias and these prejudices that I think are inherent there at an individual level. I don't think it's a big conspiracy. I don't think they're getting a call from Big 12 HQ. I do think, though, that there is a bias against OU that is percolating through in these different instances that it's just pretty bad. And it's really frustrating when it comes down to something like player safety, when you're not calling something like that. That's just pretty awful.
And even with all that being said, we still had the game in our hands come crunch time and couldn't
do it.
Couldn't end it.
So enough excuse making with the officiating. Let's talk about how bad we were in terms of execution. And I wanted to talk about the offense to start out. We can definitely pick on the defense some, but I think the play calls were really questionable at times. One in particular was it's in the third quarter, 10 minutes to play. It's 3rd down and 2, and we get a run that's just stuffed. It's clear that they've got like 9 guys in the box. They're clearly selling out against our run. How do you not check down to just some little loft pass? Because we end up going for it on 4th and 2 or 4th and 3 anyway.
I think it was 3rd and 2, and we lost a yard.
And
then
so
it was 4th and 3,
and
we
you
went
go
for
for
that.
it. So if you're going to go for it, why don't you just loft the ball up in a way? And if the ball play isn't there, you throw it away.
Yep.
And you're in the same position or better position to go for it on 4th. So that's one of many, many things that's questionable. And I'd like to say we need a milk carton here to put the Wildcat on it. Where's the Wildcat? What happened to it?
We were 1 in 13 combined on 3rd and 4th down today, and we didn't see the Wildcat once.
Yep.
And it's not a cure-all. I'm not saying run the Wildcat every single time it's 3rd and 3
Right.
or whatever, but
Maybe.
we saw how effective it was in the Texas game with the players we have now. And you go back to Belldozer days. How crazy effective was that? We're pulling Landry Jones is the leading passer in Oklahoma history. We're pulling him off the field to run Blake Bell out there, who's
Because it was
converting it.
working.
And
Who's
guess what?
converting it 90%
Everybody
of the
knew
time.
what we were going to do.
Yeah.
And
They
we were
all-
still converting.
Every time
And
Blake
it was
Bell runs
actually-
out there, they knew it was coming.
And it was actually
and couldn't stop
simpler
it.
then than what we've been running in terms of Wildcat. So we're actually more complex with it.
Right.
And
Because
so
they have
all the more reason to use
Because we
it.
had a quarterback out there that could do either, but not letting a running back take a direct snap with extra linemen in there is ridiculous. They put Chris Murray in the backfield on one of the plays and brought in
we false started.
and we false started, of course, on the center, which I don't know how that works.
It was really weird. It didn't seem to
It didn't
move the
look
ball
like-
to me.
yeah, it didn't look
I
like
think they
that.
called it on the wrong
I think
player.
the defense leaned over and he went to snap it, and they thought the defense got back or something. I don't know.
I don't know what they thought.
It was messed
It was
up.
weird, but it was one
That's
of
shooting yourself in the
many.
foot.
What was our 3rd down conversion rate? 1 of 13.
On 3rd and 4th combined, we were 1 in 13.
That's pathetic. And they were mostly short yardage situations. We're not talking about 3rd and 10.
We didn't have a ton of
No.
We like 4th and 8s. We didn't.
No,
we didn't have
we
a
didn't
bunch
do
of
that.
those. We
But
didn't have,
that's something
it's
I brought up
third
during
and
the
two,
game.
third and three.
And even watching some of the games that we've watched since, everybody has a short yardage third and fourth down package that they're running, or plays that they're running, and are running effectively. It's like we are overcomplicating and that maybe that falls into the 30% coaching that we're saying is we 0% effective. And it's not even the fact that we're not effective. It doesn't even look like we were talking about with the Wildcat and everything else. We didn't have the right personnel out there to go and effectively run a short yardage third and fourth down.
I mean, Gray was running up and down the field, and at one point
Gets one playoff.
and then he went to the sideline for one play, and Barnes comes in. I think it was that play. He gets stuffed on the 3rd and 2.
Yep.
They sprint Eric Gray back out there, who had just ran us probably a total of 50 yards down the field on,
And was
on like
clearly
four
winded.
plays. Totally winded. And he gets one play to sit out instead
After
of
a
just
hurry up. After a hurry
yeah,
up.
instead of just running or even huddle up and figure out what you're going to do. Give your offensive line a breather for that big 4th and 2, 4th and 3.
Yep.
Instead of trying to hurry up, which everybody's worn out from going right down the field in a short number of plays over and over.
Yeah, the hurry up really bugged me today. I understand it's your comfort zone and it's what you practice a lot, but at some point, at least in the week of preparation, you should say maybe we should change it and do something different. But definitely in the game, can't you do something different? It's not working. You're not doing yourself any favors. You're not playing complimentary football for your defense, who's out there so much. There's just so many negatives to it where I'm not seeing the positives.
We had multiple 3-and-outs today that lasted less than a minute.
Yeah.
Because we ran on first down, and then we hurried up, and then we threw it incomplete, and then threw it incomplete, and then we punted, and 35, 40 seconds has gone off the clock a couple times in the first half specifically.
And at this point, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the TCU and the Texas game. If this is a philosophy that we're going to be preaching for the players who are coming in, and for the new guys, would we rather stick to the philosophy and sacrifice potential success for maintaining that kind of mindset and maybe not being successful because we don't have personnel on the field who's good enough to execute? Mm-hmm. Or do we work the other way and say, hey, what we're trying to do is not going to work with these guys? So do we revamp and try to just kind of redo, blank slate it and do something different? And at this point, you're one win. You're not bowl eligible yet. In my mind, you have to do something different over the next 2 weeks to make sure
This is desperation football.
to make sure that you make a bowl game. And at that point, if we beat Oklahoma State next week, sure, go ahead and trot out whatever you want against Texas Tech,
right?
And do your philosophy, your mindset, and go with that. But you got to go win a football game.
Unfortunately, I think part of the problem is they are a little myopic, or you might say it's a forest for the trees problem. They're not going to step back and see it strategically like that. They're thinking game to game, what do I need to do to win? In a sense of, this is my offense, this is my defense, this is my philosophy, and I'm going to go out and do it. Not thinking to all of the issues and thoughts that you're bringing up, Connor, and we brought up similar things throughout the season. That's a much more strategic look of how does this fit in with where I want to be in the big scheme of things. Because honestly, the big scheme of things right now is make a bowl game for 15 more practices. Everything else doesn't matter.
No.
Nothing else matters. And everything should be up for grabs, including player positions, who is starter, who is a second string, who is on this team at all. You need to be thinking about it in those drastic terms, which is sort of a little blank slate-ish, I think, and it's the right way to be. I think everything has to be questioned. I'd like to question, thinking about strategic things, let's go all the way back to, and I hate criticizing an individual player, but it's just, I think, a fair evaluation. Dylan Gabriel is not the quarterback we were told he was going to be, or at least that they expected him to be. And we've seen his ceiling, and it's a pretty low ceiling. It will not surprise me at this point if Jackson Arnold's able to come in and actually take his job as a true freshman. And that's saying something.
And if you're not eyes wide open when he gets on campus, if you're Jeff Lebby,
right,
and saying, hey, all the conversations we had up to this point where I told you have a chance to compete for a job are actually true, then Lebby's not the guy for the job, in my opinion.
Well, that is kind of related to the point I was going to get at, which was Lebby's decision to pursue Gabriel. I think you were saying earlier, Connor, during the game, that when we look at the way he did it, it was a little knee-jerk and a little bit reactionary. going to something familiar versus taking a step back, as far as we can see from the outside looking in, not looking and evaluating at who we needed. Now, I know we were under a weird situation with Caleb Williams and the nature of him leaving, not knowing exactly what he was going to do, when he was going to make a decision, and all of that. But at the same time, he should have been strategically thinking about who was the right quarterback, and for some reason he believed this was the right quarterback. And I have to question his judgment at this point, unless he can show me that he looked at the entire field of everyone else potentially out there and said, no, I need to get this guy because nobody else is as good as this
the
guy.
only serviceable
or
guy
this
that's
is
out
the
there.
guy that I know I can get versus take, and he'll leave and go somewhere else if I try for to stretch for a home run. So I don't know. It's frustrating to me. I feel like we were a little oversold on Gabriel, and maybe they were rightfully thinking he was better than he actually is because of what they knew about him. It's just frustrating at this point to clearly have a guy who has plateaued in a way that's not going to be able to win us football games.
Well, and we haven't seen enough of him to make this judgment. But, what does it look like if Levy says, let's explore the portal a little bit more. Maybe we still swing and miss at Jackson Dart. He still ends up at Ole Miss. And we are stuck with, with Bevel, Evers, and Booty. I mean, in my opinion,
what it looks like.
In my opinion, are we going to win? Have we won less games with Evers back there than what we have right now? Maybe, but I don't
maybe
know.
Maybe
Not.
Maybe
I mean,
not.
We're 2-5 in conference play.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think
so. You're saying maybe we don't beat Kansas.
we could
beat Iowa
have
State?
we could have beat
I don't know
Nebraska,
about that.
Kent State, and UTEP with Evers behind
sure.
center, in my opinion. So that's 2 wins that are up in the air at that point. I mean,
also the other guy that was on the board was Casey Thompson. I mean, I don't know that he's any better than Gabriel.
And I think they made from what we hear, they made a pass at him, and it didn't bite. But
No,
I don't know how hard they pursued him.
I think he was coming until the Dylan Gabriel thing happened.
Okay, that stopped him from coming. He
Yes.
would have come.
Yes.
Well, I think we'd be better off with Casey at this point.
I think they're about the same player, honestly.
It's hard to say. It's hard to know what Levy could have coached. I do go back to something I think I can say with a lot more confidence than all of the speculation about Gabriel, and that is Levy's inability to prepare and have developed quarterback play behind Gabriel is a big indictment on him as a coach. And that is something that I can be pretty confident in how critical I want to be about it. I'm very critical of that. And it's not just what we saw against Texas and a little bit of TCU when Gabriel goes out, although that's a big part of it. It's also just what we've seen in terms of when Gabriel's struggling, there's definitely not somebody on the bench, it looks like, who can come in and replace him. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a big problem.
that's worrisome. It's very worrisome. So, and again, we need one more win. I mean, at this point, that's what we're looking at. I don't even care how we get at this point. It's just we got to get a win on the board. We got to get to a bowl game. Those practices are going to be crucial, I think. And you got to start reinstating some of the mindset and the culture, and maybe start moving on to the next, set of guys who are going to be more your guys than anything else.
At this point, you got to hope that Jackson Arnold still honors his commitment, because if he doesn't come in,
I don't think that's too much of a risk from everything he's reiterated. I mean,
and hopefully people are seeing stuff like Nick Benito tweets and says, if you think this is on the coaches, you're pretty incorrect.
right.
So,
Well, I mean, let's keep in mind, there are a lot of teams right now that are 5-5 and in similar situations.
not very many in the blue blood status.
No, not this year.
I mean, the closest
But-
one you would say is maybe A&M.
but everybody's gone through these
I don't think they're
spells.
blue blood, but
Michigan
No.
Michigan was in this state
Michigan
a couple
was in
years
this
ago.
a few years ago. Notre Dame's been in this situation a few years. USC's been in this
I'm
position.
talking about this year
So
specifically.
Yeah, this year's
yeah,
specific.
I mean, but that's just happenstance. I'm saying this is not. There's nothing unique about this recruiting class versus others. If these kids are more fickle than somebody else in a different recruiting class, these are going to be these kids. I think are going to be as fickle as any group has ever been, or as not fickle, and we should be able to retain recruits, and we should be able to sell into this as, hey, there's a lot of opportunity to come play, and you're coming to play at Oklahoma, you're not coming to play at some secondary program, and we're trying to build success for the future. Who I think's in a lot worse position than us is Texas A&M. That's where I think you've got a lot of question marks, because that's a coaching staff that's been there for a while and has had recruiting classes. The cupboard's not bare at Texas A&M. where we do have a lot of struggles right now in terms of depth and quality of
We
talent.
have no depth. We have no depth. We had 3 wide receivers touch the ball today.
Well, the defense today, as decent as they played for the majority of the game, there were so many missed tackles on the 4th and 3 plays and the 3rd and 6s that allowed them to go for it on 4th because, I mean, we don't want to pick the players out, but Danny Stutzman just got run over or
Out of
over-pursued.
position, over-pursued.
I mean, we've seen it. He was the guy that we were most looking forward to this season, being the guy that Venables was really going to coach up. He was going to be our guy, and he has fallen completely short of all expectations. And even throughout the season, it seems like he hasn't got any better in the slightest.
No, there's been
And he
if,
had an
if anything
interception
there's been regression across the board on the defensive side.
You look at a young guy like Kanik, and he had a horrible play today on the fake punt where we clearly had a great defensive play called on what was a potential
it was a punt
fake,
safe. Yeah.
and we had it figured out. It's almost like we knew exactly what their potential fake punt was,
And still didn't
and
get to
he
it.
over pursued the
3 guys all meshed to the right,
and
the guy
he
made
just
one
over
cut.
pursued and left the lane open, and the guy makes the cut to get what he needs to get for a first
But maybe
down.
that says a lot too. It looks, I mean, with stuff like that, it just looks like we're not used to being in the right position.
Well, I agree.
And then when we end up in the right position, we don't know what to do.
With it. What my point was going to be, at least Kanik can hang his hat on the very true fact that he's a true freshman, whereas Stutzman, this is just bad.
Yep.
He is still making freshman
It's
type
still
of
his
mistakes.
first year in the system. I mean,
True,
first year,
but it's not his
playing,
first
because he
year
really
at
didn't, he didn't
FBS
get to play
football.
hardly any last year. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's
But he
really
was-
his first. He's really a freshman in all aspects of that. Even though
I don't know. It's hard for me.
I mean, I'm not going to stick up for all this crap I've seen him do this season.
Right. I'm somewhere in between that. I just think it's frustrating to see a guy here in the 10th game of the year who is
Making the same
and he's
mistakes.
a sophomore and he's making the same mistakes, and he's been around a long time.
And just not wrapping up.
He's not wrapping up. He's not. He tried to. It was like he was doing some judo move on a guy one time, or something from a kung fu movie, rather than try to actually put his arms around someone and grab him. And pull him to the
They just look
ground.
weak. They just look weak.
They look weak and
we've
out of
given up-
position.
We've given up 9 of 11 on 4th down in the last 3 games. 9 of 11. I mean, we've only won one of those games, but you shouldn't. That's a telltale sign of you winning and losing.
Right.
9 of 11 on 4th down, and I know all across college football, the analytics are go for it on 4th and shorts. You know, even if you're on. I mean, last week Baylor went for it on their own 29, and
In a crucial game,
Yeah.
scenario,
and got it. And
Yeah.
it just seems like, the analytics, everybody's doing it, but we're not ever stopping it. I mean, we've stopped
it's
it
very
twice
similar
out of
to
11
Maybe
times.
all those
Similar to last
analytics
year.
are skewed by
Because of
the
us.
statistics of us in,
It could
the
be.
mix. But
And that's
no,
just the
because
last
when
3
we go
games.
for it, we don't get it.
I don't
and
have the
so it
numbers
can
for the
be
whole
it.
season. That's just the last 3 games. So who knows how bad our 4th down.
Well,
it's definitely been a lot more prominent the last few
Percentages.
games.
at some point, so when I criticize and say that I think it's 30-70 coaches versus players, there's actually more context there that I should add or correct myself with. The players, when I say 70% is attributable to players, that doesn't necessarily mean these players bear that responsibility. The lack of talent and depth is something that would be part of that 70. So it's not as if those guys deserve 70% of the blame as much as the situation maybe deserves 20 or 30% of the blame, where we just are thin and underdeveloped.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, the underdevelopment at this point in the season probably does reflect a little bit more on the coaches in a way that I'm not being as critical as I should be of them and their inability to get us in a position to win. And have won more games than we have. It'd be okay to lose this game, or it'd be better to lose this game if we had already won a couple of the games we lost, but that didn't happen. So now we're at a 5-5 record that is not just painful, but disturbing and a little bit concerning. For the future.
Yeah.
We are at a blue blood program, and we talked about this before, but it's Oklahoma, and it's not got some of the fundamentals that can help it get through a tough spell. We got to be careful, because there's no reason we have to be good at football. That could slip away from us if we're not careful, and I think that's something that maybe a lot of
That's
fans
a slippery
are seeing
slope
this.
too.
And it's a true slippery
Yeah,
slope.
actually,
For
Yep.
sure. It's in Nebraska is always the poster child of that, for sure. Well, let me talk about or relate Jay's comments. Jay wasn't able to be with us today, but he threw in he sent me some comments for me to read that are really good.
I'll be the judge of that.
And we'll let you be the judge. We'll hold Jay in judgment. And here we go. We just need to wash our hands of this season. Call it what you want, but it's a combination in no order of incompetence, mismanagement, heart, talent, scheme, play calling, execution, bad luck, and a team that doesn't know how to win games. Should have been an easy victory with simple execution. Have to agree with that. Pathetic offense play calling, going away from what works, always just at the wrong time. You also couldn't do it better if you tried. You almost couldn't do it better if you tried. I think he means couldn't be worse. Couldn't be.
If you're trying to lose.
If you're trying to lose.
Yeah.
Wildcat play sheet must have been lost somewhere in Dallas. Coaching decisions are baffling. We kick when we should go for it and go for it when we should kick. Time management gaffes as usual. We didn't mention that, but there were definitely. How we don't let them score late so we have a chance is inexcusable. I don't know about that. I tend to disagree. I don't think you can let them take a game-leading position. It'd be different if we were down, but we were tied and they have to kick the field goal. So I don't necessarily agree with that. Fourth down defense in last 3 games has allowed 9 of 11 conversions. No way any other team has ever lost to this many backup quarterbacks. I'm glad every single other team has another quarterback on the bench besides OU. It's pathetic and a complete indictment on the staff. We touched on a lot of these points, Jay. It's good to get some validation from an outsider who watches the games from afar. If I have to be positive, now what is this?
Yeah.
We can get to 7 to 8 wins and somewhat save this little pride we have. Coaches made some mistakes, but it's still on players to make plays. Willis is half a yard too deep. Mims drops wide open pass. Gabriel misses wide open Mims. Penalties at crucial times. The penalties at crucial times are pretty bad. One of them stands out to me. Sorry to diverge from Jay's thoughts for just a second.
Face
but
mask.
The face mask, when we clearly are going to make a tackle for loss, sack on the quarterback.
And make it 3rd and 20 plus.
It's not like the guy didn't know. Who was it that made the
R.
face
Mason
Thomas. He knows his buddy is with him. He knows that he's not the only one pursuing the quarterback. And he just can't help himself but throw it.
I mean, he's
was
so
a
much
pretty
bigger than
blatant
that quarterback was tiny. I think he just opened his arms to get the quarterback, and the quarterback moved just right to where
I don't know.
His hand grabbed his face
I don't know.
mask.
You got to be more cautious than that at that point. I don't know. That just really
He also put his
me.
left hand up to try to bat down if it was going to be a pass.
Maybe.
And when the quarterback tucked it and he brought his left hand down, he just grabbed his face mask.
You just got to be better than that. That's my point of view.
Just land on him.
Just land on him. And if
Well,
you
no,
miss,
that'd be a penalty
let
too,
somebody else get the sack who's right next to you. Back to Jay. We are equally as close to 8-2 as we are to 5-5. Well, that's not true.
No.
We are 5-5, but I understand what he's saying. That we with a few bounces of the ball, we're 8-2. I can see that. Keeping recruiting class together is obviously crucial. Levy needs to improve, but we wouldn't be complaining at all with a better quarterback at the helm. So it's an interesting dynamic as a fan when it comes to coaches/players. Absolutely must win in good fashion next week. I don't I like a lot of those comments. I don't agree 100% with all of them.
On the offense, I don't agree with. I mean, today the time of possession was 37 West Virginia, 22 for us.
And that was very prominent. I mean, that's something I was going to say earlier is we were ranting and raving about the defense up until that last drive in the first half.
Yeah.
And you see a drastic drop. And that's, again, maybe
Crucial,
that goes back to
We played 28 minutes of good defense.
But at the same time, we've seen it, all these flash in the pans of, hey, we might actually be putting something together here. We can never maintain that for 4 quarters. Especially on that side of the ball.
How often do you lose a game with the turnover ratio was 2-0? Like, we had 2 turnovers and gave up none.
Yeah.
And we walk away with a loss to subpar team.
And both turnovers we got, we made nothing out of it. I think one we went 3 and out, and another we stalled around midfield.
And this was on the road, but the West Virginia crowd didn't seem super hyped.
Didn't seem like West Virginia.
Yeah,
right.
No, it did not
normally
seem
we're
like
used
a
to playing that
hostile
as a
crowd.
night game and it's some big
Didn't seem
drunk
like
fest.
a hostile crowd
But
at
no,
all.
the crowd
Didn't
didn't
seem
seem
loud.
into it
The
at all.
weather should have been in our favor.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
in a big, big
Eric
way.
Gray had 225 rushing yards.
Right. Well, that goes back to a criticism Jay made as well as us, that the play calling was baffling and troubling. You just could run the ball more, and you could possess the ball longer. You could put yourself in a better position to win, just leaning more heavily on the run game. So Jay's last point, I don't know if I agree with that. He's not here to defend it. I don't know if that's a must-win. I understand what he means from a standpoint of getting to a bowl eligibility. It's really tough to win. It's probably a more winnable game than the game in Lubbock, so maybe he means to from that standpoint. But it's not like, I don't know what is in the balance if we lose that game necessarily, other than it's not good to lose it. So I don't know if it's a must-win game, because I don't know
it
what
just
that
depends
means.
how you want to frame that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I almost fall into the category of saying it's a must-win just because I don't think we, like you just said, I think we have a much better chance of winning next week than when we go down to Lubbock, especially after what we saw today.
And depending on who plays at quarterback for Oklahoma State.
Right. So I still, and I'm not to get too far ahead of us, but I mean, if I look at these next 2 games, they're both toss-ups. I think it's a 1-1, and I could see either one, the win or the loss, coming on both games.
Yeah,
so
that's a fair assessment. I think it's an important game. It's, to me, it's not. I couldn't call it a must-win just from the standpoint of,
we still have one left.
well, it's just not must-win. What does must mean?
Yeah,
we're not going to cease to be a football program or
right.
whatever. It's a must-win.
It's a must-win if you want to probably further your season after.
Yeah, it's a very important chance at it, and you got one of two that it's a must-win for sure. I'd have to agree with that. And I might, in general, just have to say, if you want to regain and have some dignity in this season at the end of it, then we might be looking at 3 must-wins.
What is our team deriving their confidence from? Like, what are they looking at and saying, this is good, I can build off of this? Because every time I feel like we hit that, you can go back to Iowa State. There were some good moments in that game. I mean, crap, the score by itself is something that you can say, look, I mean, we gave up 13 points. I don't care who it's to at this point.
Right.
What are we sitting on saying, this is what's working and this is what we need to keep doing? Because I don't see any of that.
I don't know. When I say at the top of the pod that we're broken, it's a team that's broken, that's what I worry about. Because other than it to obviously put on my amateur psychiatrist hat from afar and read into the mindset of this group of individuals, I would say I don't know, unless it's just leaning on the fact that they're 18 to 22-year-old kids who they're pretty resilient and they think a lot more of themselves than they probably deserve to, which is true of every 18 to 22-year-old, if not other people at every age. And they are hopefully looking forward, and maybe the coaches are just looking forward and drinking some Kool-Aid together. I don't know. Otherwise, I don't know, because it's a lot to get depressed about. It's pretty easy.
Yeah,
I feel for them.
Because sitting on the principles and the philosophy that Brent Venables is bringing to the table is obviously not enough. And I'm wondering if that's week in and week out, if Venables is doing these basically Sunday services after a loss to say, resiliency and it's how we respond and it's how we do this. No, Brent, this team does not respond to that, obviously.
Well,
and that's not enough.
You said something earlier, Connor, that was interesting earlier in the day, maybe during the game, about the discipline. So you might talk to that a little bit.
I think after all of these losses, and I understand it, it's some coach speak and it's what you have to say, but it's one of these things where at some point you telling me that it comes down to discipline obviously is not enough, because the lack of discipline week in and week out, especially on the defensive side of the ball, it's really easy to point out. And I'm not saying Dylan Gabriel is not disciplined. I just don't think he's good, which is a lot of the offense's problem in my opinion. But you can't keep preaching this disciplined mindset when none of your players show it. It's not even, hey, this guy's actually, we can all point to Billy Bowman in a lot of circumstances and say he's been the constant in all of this. Even today, we're looking at some plays where he's not disciplined, and he's falling to that. I'm in the right place, but I'm not doing the right thing, or I'm not in the right place at all, and I'm getting exposed. So, I'm going to need more than that, especially if we come out and we go 5-7.
Oh,
and
oh,
you'd have to. Him going to the last press conference of the year and saying, it comes down to the lack of discipline. That's not enough, and it's not good enough. It's not a good enough excuse.
well, at that point, you have to say, well, whose fault is the lack of discipline?
Yeah. So are
Who
you
blaming?
not disciplined enough to coach your players to
Yeah.
play a certain way to win,
Right.
or are your players not disciplined enough to go win you a game, and you expect that to change as you get more guys in?
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
It's a lot.
It is interesting. I don't think they ever are as honest as they probably
It's
should be
coach
or
speak.
could
Behind
be.
the doors.
There's
Behind the
too
doors,
much.
they're not.
There's too
Yeah.
much coach speak, though. It doesn't need to be the case. I understand it during the season, but after the season, or at least find an eloquent way of saying it, without throwing your players under the bus. But it's fair to say what is the elephant in the room,
Yep.
and that is we are
Not
not
very
up
good.
to Oklahoma football standards. This is not what we want. This is what we're trying to do, and we need deeper personnel to do it. And I don't know how that would be an insult to any of the players, because they have to know this is not right. This is not who we want to be.
Yeah.
And it would be just an honest statement. So there's fairness in that.
Well, if all the posts we read where it says these players are all extremely hard on themselves and, they're the ones who are more upset about themselves not doing the right thing and all this stuff, then a statement like that doesn't have any sort of impact on that.
Right.
Because that's what those players are experiencing internally already.
Well, in fact, they need a break don't put it on them. They're not a bunch of 90-plus 5-star athletes who everyone expects that they should be that good, who are getting paid some type of tremendous NIL money to be here and do really good things. They're not. So no one expects them to do something they're not capable of.
Right.
We want more. When we say that our best running back right now, Eric Gray, is not up to the standards of what we want at a running back, it's not so much an indictment of him. It's not like I'm telling the kid, hey, run faster, run stronger, be 30 pounds heavier and a second faster. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we want a guy who is closer to those things that I described, and unfortunately, we're stuck with what we've got right now. We've all got to acknowledge our limitations, but from a coaching standpoint, they've got to be pursuing the next level of talent, both at an individual level and in a cumulative level in terms of depth.
I'd much rather have these higher expectations that we're speaking of than
Settling
Venables
for something
settling
less.
and saying, this is just what it's supposed to be like in a
Do you think he's saying that?
in a turnaround year.
Like Mike Gundy. Gundy says we can't go get those
No, I
big time
think-
athletes.
and-
We're getting the
He-
2 and 3 stars.
well,
and we're
I don't
gonna-
think Venables
He's not saying
is
that.
saying that. I think Venables is holding a standard, and I think his players are continually below the bar of that. And I think Venables is going to stick to his guns. I don't even think behind closed doors that he's going to say, oh, this is what we expected and this is how it's supposed to be. Yeah, there's the 7-win clause in the contract that we talked about last week, but at the same time, there's no way, at least unless Venables is an amazing thespian and actor, I don't think that he has any sort of mentality where this is quote unquote okay. So
I don't think so either. I really hold him to a higher standard. Now, it will be interesting to see, and this is kind of becomes if not a midweek pod topic, a post game or a mid off season pod topic, and that would be where does he go in terms of his coaching staff, and when does he start thinking about making changes there?
yeah, I was thinking about that too.
There's
There's got to be a couple names now.
I hate to think that that's necessary or to be such a reactionary, but man, I'm seeing things that are frustrating, and I'm seeing more things that are frustrating on the better side of the ball, and that's offense. Defense I will give more grace to than actually the offense. In
There's
terms
a lot more
of
to fix there.
when I worry about the lack of a backup quarterback development, when I see play calling the way I've seen it, those are things that really make me worry and question Lebby. But all that said, I think it's rightfully probably not likely that we see anybody like that lose their job after this first year. But I think that they rightfully at the same time would be entering next season on probation. and it's a lot to be proved. And if you can't prove yourself, then that's when a change would need to be made following the 2023 season.
Well, and I think it needs to be one of those things as well where it's kind of like with recruits, with coaches that aren't here yet or are at other places right now, you'd still need to sell Oklahoma as an opportunity and as a step up. I don't ever want to hear, moving from Ole Miss to Oklahoma or even maybe a lesser school like an Auburn to an Oklahoma is a lateral move or something
Right.
like that.
Oh, God.
Those are the conversations, or as a coach,
That's scary.
or from a fan perspective, when you're talking about coaches, I don't ever want to have to talk about that.
No, please no.
So you run that risk if you keep rattling stuff off like you are, or if you have even an additional down year next year with the SEC as a high possibility, more than likely circumstance the year after, where if I'm a coach, I am questioning it. Is that really where I want to go going into that, especially with what I've seen on the field and from the staff that's there right now? So you still need to make it an appealing job, and you need to do that sooner rather than later.
I want to see if you got any comments, Lucas. You've been kind of quiet for a minute, sulking over here as the resident realist. Although I think there's a lot of realism going around this little campfire that we got built here in the backyard. But first, that made me think of something I heard. I was listening to a different podcast this week, Blackboards and Ballparks, and it's a group of sports economists and marketing people that usually have pretty interesting insights about sports in general, and they cover a big wide range of sports. But actually, in their latest one, Venables came up, and they're very much outsiders to this, and they're sports fans. They know college football, but they don't follow college football, I don't think, the way that we do. But it was interesting to hear their perspective, and they were very critical for the brief time they were talking about Venables about just how poor Oklahoma has played this year. And from their perspective, it was interesting. I thought it was quite unfair. They were saying a lot of things that were very negative, like Venables is in over his head, potentially, and maybe doesn't deserve this job. And I definitely don't feel that's true in any respect. I bring it up, though, to say these are people that do follow sports and are on the outside. I wonder how much of that is the sentiment elsewhere. And you've got people who are thinking either as a recruit or it's important to continue to gather fans, especially bandwagon fans, and you definitely have no bandwagon fans right now, but also as as coaches and people that want to associate with the program. If they have their concerns about his ability to be a head coach and do the job, that is troubling, and that's definitely not the direction we want to be going. I think it was a bit of an overstatement when I heard this said, and it kind of bristled at it a little bit. But it is something that is probably legitimate. As a homer, I'm going to have that take, but maybe I need to step back a little and say this is how at risk this is when we have a season this bad. I think it's very explainable from the standpoint of what we've been left with. It was something that I did not expect would be this dire and this bad. I didn't realize how thin we would be after all was said and done. I really expected we'd be more competitive than this. I chalk it up to my own elevated expectations or potentially things that we were told and a lot of the marketing, and you buy into the marketing hype because it's really stroking what you want to be the case. I don't know. But it is interesting to know that there's other people out there that are seeing Oklahoma at a 5-5 record and aren't giving a lot of grace to the fact that the difficult job that Venables, and my perspective that Venables is facing with how difficult then the situation is in terms of talent and depth and experience. But what are your thoughts, Lucas?
Well, I think I said last week that I still wasn't convinced that Venables is the guy. I hope to be proven wrong. Well, like I said, I don't say that he's not the guy, but I can't say that he is the guy. And I know that's straddling the line, but
I would agree with that.
I looked at the NFL and there's
No, I'd agree with what you said. Not that you're straddling
there's
the line.
guys. Oh, okay. There's guys like Josh McDaniels, played or coached at the Patriots, right? He gets the job at Denver, goes and fails, goes back to New England, wins a bunch of games. Of course, he's got Tom Brady, and Belichick's defenses are usually great. And now he's taken the Raiders job as a head coach, and they're failing miserably and they have a ton of offensive talent, and they have failed miserably there. Matt Patricia is another Patriots guy. Went to Detroit. Great. He was a great coordinator for the Patriots. Goes to Detroit, fails miserably, goes back to the Patriots. Some guys are better coordinators and may not ever be able to take the next step up to head coach. I'm not saying that's 100% what's happening with Venables. Now, 2 more years of 8-4s or
we'll all be there together.
Yeah,
I'll speak for Connor. I know we'll all
if
be
we
there
finish the
together.
season,
I'll speak for
after,
Jay.
I'll be there after next year.
I think we probably finish the season 6-6 at this point. He may still finish 5-7, but I mean, we fired Schnellenberger after a really crappy single year. That was mainly personality, and he was a terrible
There was
person.
a lot of what the program was going in the wrong
Right.
direction,
but
too. And there were
this program over the last 2
pretty
seasons
ugly
has
stuff.
gone downhill. Previous regime, and now if you have another year or two of anything remotely resembling anything less than 10-2, 9-3s, then we have a serious discussion about something needs to change at the top. And like I said, I've pointed out some NFL examples. There's other college examples. Lane Kiffin was a great coordinator. He was at USC. He went to Tennessee and failed, and then took a job at where'd he go? Florida Atlantic. And then that's an easier
Replacing
job.
Schnellenberger.
That's an easier job to try to win big in a lower conference with a talented head coach.
For sure.
But now he's gone to Ole Miss, and he seems like a completely different person over the last couple of years. We were bragging about how much more we like Lane Kiffin compared to how much we laughed at him for getting left on the tarmac or whatever at USC. And I mean, he got the head coaching job at USC, right?
Yes.
So he's been a guy that was a better coordinator than
He's
head coach
totally
until recently.
Until recently.
But I mean, maybe this is Venables' humbling experience that maybe a couple of years of not bringing this program back up, that we have to make a move, and he goes back to being defensive coordinator somewhere really good, and then either he never wants to take another head coaching job, or he goes somewhere else and gets better later.
Well, I
don't
hope
know.
that's not true. I don't
hope it's not
suspect
true
it's
as well.
true. I know you do. Yeah, I know we're all in the same. We all like Venables as a person. We all like the story. We'd love for this to work. Obviously, we'd love for it to work if nothing else, because we don't want to have a setback again. We want to be on the road to progress as soon as possible. I think that is really the key, is that you need to be progressing. I will give him a lot of grace that this is a team that I am very surprised at how down they are in terms of ability to win. And I mean that from the standpoint of their capability to be better than 5-5 at this point is not real great. I do think it's been a disappointing season, that they probably should have won a couple games they didn't, but I'm not as disappointed in the record as I would be if this were a 5-5 team in any of the last 7 or 8 years at least, and maybe even more than that. If you have to go back maybe all the way to 2014 when I had a team, and even then we were pretty disappointed in that team. So I don't know if any time in the Stoops era you would say that this is a team we can give some excuse to be at a 5-5 record. So
I mean, we're a high probability of finishing last in the Big 12.
Yeah,
And that's mind blowing.
Right.
I mean, with
but I think
the recruiting classes we've had over the last 5 years, it's not like we've been recruiting 40th or even 25th.
But
we've had top 15.
But we've lost
recruiting
a lot of
classes.
those recruits, so we're not that good. We don't have enough to.
Well, we talked about that stat.
We shouldn't expect to be very much better than we are.
About 6 weeks ago, where Jay pulled up the recruiting classes and showed how many people were still on the squad.
Right, which is so few.
Much less starters, but
So
even
few.
on the sideline from those recruiting classes over the last 5 years.
Right. No, and so that's my point. I think that we are rightfully somewhere around the record of 5-5 to 8-2. We just happen to have caught the bottom of what is reasonable, and that surprises me. I didn't think that we'd be here 11 months ago, but now I see it and I say, yeah, I get it. I get that how we could be 5-5 in a reasonable world. It's disappointing. It does light a little bit of a fire that we have to have that much more improvement, but the room for improvement is that much higher, because if we go 8-4 next, let's say that we finish 6-6 and we go 8-4 next year in the regular season. Again, context is everything, but I'd probably be satisfied with the progression. Although my standards are probably going to be higher, I would expect that I'm going to believe we're going to be even stronger than that. In fact, I'm probably going to say more like a 10-2 season is what I'm aiming for next year. in terms of what I want to see us at least. I'd be thrilled with a 12-0 season. I'll be probably disappointed with an 8-4. But I'm not calling for any changes at 8-4. Probably depends on context, obviously.
Right.
Well, and like we said, I mean, Steve, you said it earlier, and I think we're talking this really well, and to a very high point. But we look at a team right now. I mean, we win 2 of these 3 one-possession games. This conversation that we're having right now is a lot different, and it's an if, right? I mean, we still lost the games,
right?
But at the same time,
7-3 and not as disappointed.
Yeah, and at the same time, this just looks like a team right now. We just don't know how to win football games. So we need to win.
We look broken.
And yeah, to what you said, to lead the pot off. I mean, if that's the core of what you have to do, and we don't know how to do it right now. And maybe that's a part of the philosophy that was missed is we're going to do all of this stuff to get there. How do we get past the finish line? Or here's what this looks like, getting past the finish line.
Do we know how to win? When it's in crunch time, we've seen years in the past, many years, not just in Lincoln Riley era, when we knew how to win and somehow we pulled out wins we probably didn't deserve.
And I would take all of those games bitching about how ugly that win was.
Like the 9-0.
Week in and week out.
We could have been 5-4 during that 9-0 last year.
We bitched a lot more last year, like very, very explicitly, after 9 wins than what we've done right now. And a lot of that, I mean, the circumstances were completely different, but it's like, man, especially with what this season is and what maybe we were, go back to that question that we asked a few weeks ago, where we lied to, what we thought it was going to be coming into it. It just feels so much different right now if we capture 1, if not 2 of those close games that we've lost.
Yeah, I don't think we were lied to. I think that the coaches themselves are a bit stunned. So beyond surprised, but stunned. I hope they are.
I hope they are.
I hope they are. Otherwise, we were lied to. And they did a bad job, because there's no point in lying to us in that situation. You're much better off if you are being honest and saying, look, this is going to be really, really tough. This is how thin we are, and give the guy, and you owe it to your players as well, to give them a position to have some grace from the fans. So I don't think they lied to anybody willfully. I think they were themselves deceived, or maybe a little bit homerish, if you will. They thought they could do more than what they were probably likely to be able to do with what they had. And it just is tough. It's a cop-out, or potentially it's a cop-out. You could criticize this, but my frustration and level of being pissed off at Alex Grinch in particular, and Lincoln Riley in general, among others, heightens with every experience like this, because I see, and I don't mean the leaving us high and dry, although that's a factor. I don't mean the pulling players away from us, although that's a factor. I mean the lack of recruiting across the board, the lack of development, the lack of teaching good fundamentals to kids, and they've messed up a lot of kids' opportunities to play at the next level, or at least succeed at this level and have a great experience, because they didn't leave them with good instruction.
Just no core. There was no core.
It was empty grossness, and USC is facing it right now. USC is seeing it really quickly. They're getting a lot of criticism for their defense, which sucks. And they barely pulled out a win last night by going for it going for a touchdown with 36 seconds to go,
covering the spread.
To cover the spread.
They also lead the country in turnover margin.
Another luck-ass factor. So they are really winning by the hair on their chinny chin chins, and covering spreads by the hair of the chinny chin chins. And that's going to catch up with them, I certainly hope. And it's just really frustrating. But it's the kind of stuff that we've been putting up with for a long time. It's interesting to see that already you're seeing some smoke, at least, around the idea that Alex Grinch may not be the answer at defensive coordinator for USC. I hope they don't catch on to that for a while, because I hope that they lose a lot of games and they suffer a lot, just because I'm pretty damn bitter about it.
At what point does Lincoln Riley's patience run out with Grinch? He brings him to USC as seemingly a courtesy,
right?
And
I think he believes in him. No, I think Lincoln believes in him.
I don't think so. I think he brought him this year because he knew the familiarity with the whole staff that he took, and that he was giving him this year to see what he can do. And when he realizes that this
There's
ain't it,
better
that
options out there.
I don't know.
he's
I
going to
think
be able to say,
maybe.
we look at the trajectory of this team, we can go get probably outside of maybe the top 10 coordinators in the country, they can probably get anybody after that.
I don't know. I think Lincoln's that arrogant and that myopic. I don't think he sees it. I think he sees just offense, and he thinks he just needs a defense good enough
I think
for
he's
him to
I think
win.
he's lazy. I think he's lazy
yeah.
to the point of I don't want to spend time having to figure this part out.
Because he also doesn't devote a lot of recruiting effort to recruiting defensive players, and that's something that speaks to potentially he sees it just on one side of the ball. I don't know.
I bet if they don't make the playoff,
Oh, they won't make the playoff.
I bet if they don't make the playoff,
I'll make that bet right now.
Lincoln brings in a guy that's somewhere in the 10 to 20 range of best defensive coordinators in the
You
country.
think Grinch is getting fired after this year if they don't make the playoff?
Only because I think Lincoln knows that the trajectory they're on.
Can we
if
bet?
if they can add a little bit of defense
Can we
to
bet?
it.
Can we bet?
I mean, you don't have a good betting record against me, but we'll talk about that in a couple more weeks. Well, actually, I've already hit my USC bet because they were
Yeah, you've won your USC
over
bet.
9 wins.
Yeah,
But I don't think he has
over 8.
I remember when they went to the Eddie Radosevich went down to the airport to video them getting on the plane to leave to USC, and Grinch looked pissed off. He did not want to be doing it, but he knew he didn't have a job here anymore. So I think Lincoln offered it to him, said, "Hey, you come out there with me. We're going to turn this program around." But I think Lincoln will realize that now that he's elevated that program, he can go get pretty much anybody outside the major, the elite of elite defensive coordinators that are at the Bamas and the Georgias and the stuff like that. I think he can go get a guy that's an up-and-comer and turn that defense around within a season or two of leaving Grinch.
Well, and it'll be someone like that. It'll be someone if that is the case. Grinch came as he was a co-defensive coordinator, right, at Ohio State.
Yeah.
He got run out of
And
town, basically.
it'll be something along those lines, like you said, someone who has potential or who is being talked about in circles, who says, "Hey, he's not the guy who plays or he's not the guy who calls the plays, but he's a part of it," and it'll be one of those things, and it'll be another toss-up. Is it going to work out or is it not going to work out?
Look what Ohio State did this year. They brought in Jim Knowles from OSU because he led a really good defense at OSU for a couple seasons, and they went and cherry-picked him out of there, and that would be very easy to do at a USC.
I feel like Ohio State, not necessarily, but probably at a coaching level, but an organization in general, is a better run.
Oh yeah, I'm not comparing Ohio State to USC in that aspect.
So I just don't think it's going to happen. I'll bet against you.
I don't think it'd be hard for them to go get
a
top tier defensive coordinator.
I will
Knowles
bet
just wanted
you
to go coach at the
that
real
Grinch
OSU.
does not lose his job this year on the condition they don't make the playoffs.
Well,
If they make the playoffs, all bets are off. If they don't make the playoffs, I would bet
I don't think
you.
they're going to make the playoffs. I think they lose to
All right, well, then
Notre
you bet
Dame
we'll have a
and
bet.
probably Oregon. No, I'm not making that bet. I'm just putting this.
Interesting.
I'm positing a theory that could happen because
It
of the
could
trajectory
happen.
of that program.
It could
Lincoln
happen.
will know that he can do better.
And I'm telling you,
I don't
Lincoln
think it
doesn't
happens
see
this
that
year.
way.
I don't
Lincoln
think it
doesn't
happens
think
this
that
year.
way.
I think
We'll
Lincoln
see.
probably looks back at the Utah game and says we're 1 or 2 plays away from winning the game, and I think he says Grinch is doing what he's doing to hold down what he can defensively. 11 times out of 12, I'm probably going to score more points than the other guy, and I think all Lincoln wants is a serviceable coordinator right now.
I think
which-
that's right. I don't think Lincoln is smart enough to understand how important defense is. I think he writes it off.
And I also
And
think Lincoln wants to be.
think he's arrogant.
I think Lincoln wants to be the show pony.
I
I
do
think
too.
Lincoln wants to be. Hey, this offense, this team is offense.
Right.
This team
yeah,
is.
but how many more points can he score if his coordinator is getting him the ball on more 3 and outs in a game because he brought in a better defensive coordinator?
But does he want? Does he
I know.
want? Does
They
he
can
want
put
people?
up-
Does he want people talking
But he
about how
didn't
good
have-
their
he can put up
defense is?
70 and give up 20 every game.
But he had Grinch for 2 years, and he didn't seem to see the light at all.
Because USC was so down that I don't think Lincoln thought he could go to
He had it
USC
for 3 years.
and bring in a really good coordinator with as down as that
That's 2
program
years.
was.
19, 20, and 21.
You're right. 3 years.
I don't think he thought he could bring in somebody to the
level of Grinch?
the depths of what USC is and the cost of living and all that stuff. I don't think he thought he could go.
Anybody was going to get the same salary.
Could go cherry pick a big time defensive coordinator.
You
to
think
put
his
in.
strategic decision he made was, I'm going to take Grinch because if Grinch isn't the guy, meaning he assumes he might be the guy, I can go get the guy, but after I'm there a year,
I don't think Lincoln thinks Grinch is the guy. No,
well then he's an
I
idiot
think
for brought him in.
for 4 years. He's seen what Grinch is made of, and he's going to realize that he ain't the guy.
Well, I don't see any indication that Lincoln's gotten the seen the light
Yeah.
with that. But
We'll see.
Like you said, I hope
We'll
not.
see.
I hope,
We'll
I hope
see.
USC
Yeah.
keeps giving up.
Well, we're on
30
the same
points a
page
game over and
there
over.
for sure. We're on the same page all the way there.
I guess just to round my thoughts off, maybe is, and to pull it back towards
Yeah, OU post
Venables and OU is.
It's all relevant to you. It's
No. I'm not
it's a damn
saying. I'm not
position
saying
we're
it's not.
in.
I'm
Right.
just saying. I think if you're Venables and you're going to bed at night, you're the old school dad where it's like, man, I'm not mad at you guys. I'm just like really, really disappointed. Like that this is where we're at.
Yeah.
Like that. Like you said,
You heard
I
that
don't,
your whole life in your household?
not my whole life. Yeah. Maybe later. Maybe my later.
He didn't remember the first
maybe
few.
my later years. So, I think Steve, to your point earlier, I don't think we were lied to. I think there was an expectation that was here, and based on the post that Jay sent us and that we talked about on the midweek around the defense and its state, I don't know if Venables just completely comprehended what he was getting himself into and the rubble that was left behind by the prior regime.
And
so,
what was and how just completely bare the cupboard was, or whatever
Yeah.
analogy metaphor you want to use.
we've got cans in the cupboard, but a lot of them are expired or not ripe yet.
Yeah.
And it's just one of the it's tough. So
that's a good way of putting it. There's some expired, and and you're not going to probably change those old dogs. You're not going to teach them new tricks,
Right.
and there's the young guys that you are going to be able to get to where you want them to be, but it's going to take time. I feel for the guys who are juniors and seniors who have missed an opportunity to have a successful, fun college, as good of and fun and successful a college experience as they deserved, and also potentially missed a chance to go to the next level, or at least enter the next level at as competitively as possible, and that obviously means a lot for income at that level. So I feel for them. I'm just really frustrated. I come back to the
I'm
team
upset.
is broken. I'm pretty damn upset about it.
this game was
It's
we had
frustrating.
no there's I don't care what we're putting out on the field today. There's no excuse for losing this game.
No,
There's no excuse whatsoever.
you
So
should be able to win this
that
game.
was the
That's
10th,
why-
that was the 10th place team in the Big 12 that we played today.
That's why I
And
put it at 70% players.
Yep.
They're and like I say, a good third of that, if not more, is the players that aren't there that should be, that we should have, and we just don't.
Yep.
And so it's a player problem there that if you only have 10 guys instead of 11 on offense, or 10 guys on defense instead of 11, you're going to look weak, and it's going to be bad, and you're going to be able to point to the 10 that are out there and say that they're not doing well, but it's that 11th guy you don't have that you'd like to have, should have, deserve to have if you're Oklahoma, and that absence is really telling in terms of it's critically costing us play by play and eventually game by game.
Well, and for some of these second-year guys, you look at a Billy Bowman or even what we talked about. You look at a Stutzman who's in his second year, and I don't know about he's kind of up in the air right now. But for some of these guys, you just gotta hope. You gotta hope their back half of their college career it looks better than what they've experienced this year, like you said. So,
I have hope. I believe in the staff still. I believe in those players. I think that we may look back in a couple of years and say how remarkable it is, the turnaround, and how good of a college career they ended up having. Even if it's just a college career that doesn't go anywhere, you look at a guy like Rocky Kalmus, who had a tremendous college career, was tremendously good, and obviously didn't end up going anywhere, doing anything professionally. But you could still have somebody that's an OU legend and finishes a hero
lives in lore
and
yeah.
lives in lore. I hope this for them, not just selfishly because of me, my team's winning, but I really do genuinely hope this for those kids. But I also believe in the staff and believe in those kids that they could do it. It's just so tough and daunting what they're up against.
Yep.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, the wall is high. That they
Absolutely
need to climb.
is.
So.
Well, any closing thoughts before we end this post game? We're going to have a really good midweek pod. We hope to have a special guest. He has promised to be here.
Yeah, we've been
and
teasing it, and it sounds like it might be happening.
Yeah, it might be happening. It depends on Lucas if he can pull some strings and get this big time guest. We have to buy him dinner potentially, so that's worth it. We're going to take him out for a really nice grilled cheese, and
Heard the burgers around here are pretty good.
They are on Wednesdays. So I'm sorry Jay couldn't be here. He had some good insights for us.
Yeah, I
and
feel better,
hopefully
Jay.
He can make it on Wednesday.
Feel better,
So,
Susan.
Anything else?
That's it.
Well,
That's it.
until next time, Boomer.
Sooner.